Hi, this is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Bello's Designs. So let's have a little fun today and make a label for a bottle for a Halloween decoration. We'll make our label look old and distressed and then finish it out by making it waterproof with a wax label technique. This technique I found on Pinterest by a lady named Diana. She did not have her last name, but I do want to give credit to her for learning how to do this wax technique. I hope you enjoy watching this video today. So let's go ahead and take a look at the supplies that I'll be using today. I'm going to use a piece of Lavinia Multifarious Smooth and Supreme cardstock. This has been cut to 3.5 inches by 4.5 inches, or you can cut it to a size that whatever will fit for your particular bottle that you prefer to use. Now you see that I do already have the name of my witch's potion on my cardstock. You can either create this, say using a program like Word, or you can find something on the internet that is already a pre-printed wording that you might want to use, something like that. But I just went ahead and created this myself on Word. It was a lot easier that way for me. You can also find a stamp if you'd like to do that. We will be using 3 different of stamps today. We're going to use the Lavinia Willow the Witch, and we're going to use both Willow and her cauldron. This is LAV 194. I'm also going to use the bubbles from this particular stamp set. This is the Bubbling Cauldron set, LAV 911, and you can also use this cauldron if you'd like. I just decided to go ahead and use the one that came with Willow. And then we will use the Lavinia Bats stamp set, and this is LAV 167, and I'm going to use the smaller bats. We will use 2 types of the VersaFine Clair inks. We're going to use Acorn, which is kind of a brownish color, and Nocturne, which is the black color. Then for the inks to create our distress look on our label, I'm going to use the Distress Inks Scorched Timber, Vintage Photo, Walnut Stain, and Rusty Hinge. I'm also going to go ahead and use one of the Distress Oxide sprays, and the one that I've chosen to use is Vintage Photo. This will help get us the interesting looking spots on our label to make it look old. We will also want to be sure to have on hand a spray bottle with some water in it. And I do like to use a stamping platform. This way, when we're stamping our images on there, we can make sure that if we need to do a second image, which with this particular type of way I'm going to do this label, you will need to be able to stamp in the same place. So if you've got a stamping platform, it will really help. You do not have to use 2 colors, but this is what I wanted to do to give this more old look to the label that we're going to do. We will also, in order to make the label be waterproof, and it also gives it a really interesting texture and feel, we're going to do the wax technique. So if you just get a few little shavings or chips of wax, this is just some soy wax that I had that I make candles out of, but you can take say a tea light or something like that and just shave some scrape some shavings off of that and use that. Doesn't really matter. You can use paraffin wax, you can use soy wax, whatever beeswax works as well too. Just whatever you happen to have on hand. You'll want to have an old bottle on hand, and you can use just about any size or shape that you'd like to. I actually had 2 bottles that were the same, so I'll probably go ahead and use this same bottle, but you can also use a wine bottle This is one that I had. This is kind of a green one. This might be really interesting. Use a brown one or even a clear one. With the lighter colors, you can also put liquid in them and put some food coloring in, and that just really gives a really cool look. Of course, you'll have to take off your labels. For doing the wax thing, we will also want to go ahead and have a piece of parchment paper on hand, and you'll want it to be twice as big as your cardstock in length or in width, either way, because you're going to fold it over to make a sandwich. So you'll want to be sure and have just one sheet of that on hand. You'll want to have a heating tool of some kind, so you can use a heat gun or a hair dryer. This is what will help to melt our wax. Also, I like to, you can kind of see with this one how I made it look a little bit interesting with a corner cut punch. This is optional, but if you would like to do some kind of corner cut, you can find those elaborate or simple, however you might like to do it. Or you can even tear the edges of your cardstock if you want to create that old ragged look. I will be using some blending brushes, a blending brush and a little dauber for working on this particular project. And then you will want a way to put your label onto your bottle. I just glued mine on. You could use a two-sided adhesive tape if you wanted to do that. But like I said, I went ahead and just used glue. You might want to have some rubber bands on hand so that when you do glue it on, you can put 2 or 3 on to hold your label in place until the glue dries. And then for just a little bit of detail kind of down here at the bottom, just to ground Willow and her cauldron, I just used a little fine tip black pen to draw those in. All right, so now that we have our supplies, let's get started working on our project. All right, to start out with, as I said, we will need to have a 3.5 by 4.5 inch cardstock. Now, you can also use a thinner cardstock or a paper if you would like to. Just remember that we're going to be using water in order to get our design on there. So if you have just a plain piece of paper, it may be difficult to do and not get your paper too saturated. This will, if you use the cardstock, it just gives it a little bit more durability. So you can either hand write in whatever the name of your potion that you want to call it, or as I said, I did this one on Word and just created the name of my potion, or find a clip art that you would like to use and have that on your card. I actually just printed this out and then cut down to the size that I wanted. And then, like I said, what I did with this one, I like to use my corner stamp, put my little punch. So I'm just going to create my corners. To me, that just kind of adds a little bit of interest. Okay, so now what we're going to want to do is we're going to start out by blending the entire card with rusty hinge. This just gives it a little bit of an antique-y base for us to start with before we do our distress look with our inks. Let me see if I can zoom this in just a little bit for you and get it where it doesn't autofocus itself too much. And I'm just going to take this, and it's a pretty light color, and I'm not going to worry too much about it doing dark spots and light spots or splotchiness, because that actually adds to the look of an antique-ish looking paper. Don't spend a whole lot of time on that because we are going to be doing our dipping process. Just kind of get a little base down there that'll add the interest in the aged look. So one thing that unless you have a waterproof ink, if you have a little bit of your ink that runs a little bit when we do this water technique, that only just adds to the old look and the faded look. So don't worry about that if that happens. All right, so we'll start out and let's take our vintage photo. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some down on the surface of my work table here, and I'm going to slide that over just a little bit. You probably can't see this ink. This is the lighter color. And then I'm going to spritz it with my water. And then a lot of people call this the smooshing technique. That's what I call it. You just take your paper and just dab and swoosh and move it around. And you're just going to pick up some interesting little spots and looking images. I like to dry mine in between with a heat tool or a hair dryer. You don't have to do that, but I think that kind of sets the previous little bit of ink, and you don't get quite so much blending, but a little bit more of a layering of the spots. So let's do just a tiny little bit more with our vintage photo. And you can always go back to a color once you've added it in if you would like to. It doesn't hurt to do that. Now let's move on to Walnut Stain. This is a little bit darker. Put some of that down. And you can use any colors, you know, just experiment around depending upon what kind of look you want to get. I chose the browns because I really think that helps make a really cool looking old paper look. If you get some spots that are a little bit too wet, you can always just take a little piece of paper towel and dab them a little bit. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more of our walnut stain. Now we're starting to really get some good, interesting look to our label. And maybe one more little dab with the walnut stain. Just a little bit down here. And then we'll go to our final color, which is the Scorched Timber. I really like the Scorched Timber because it almost has, I don't know if I want to call it a green tint to it, a greenish gray tint to it. It's really a neat color. And spritz that. And smoosh around. A little bit more of that. Now if you want to add other colors, greens or blues or even some black soot, experiment around with it. See what you come up with. Oh yeah, we're getting some really good, fun looks with that. I'm going to do a tiny bit more Scorched Timber at the top. And I might even just see what happens if I don't add a whole lot more water. Just kind of get a dry kind of look to it. All right. So now we've got this really great distressed looking label. Now if you want to, this is not a need to do, but if you'd like to, take your rusty Hinge and your blending brush and just blend over the top of it. This brings out a little bit more of that reddish gold tone. Whoops. And then sometimes, to me, when I do that blending over the top after I've done the smooshing technique, it just seems to make the colors go together a lot better. Just kind of blends them all together. All right, so now we're done with our smooshing technique. Play with it till you get the look that you like. Then, for just a little bit more of a splattery look, we're going to do two different things. The first thing is we're just going to spray a mist with our bottle across the top of it and let it sit for just a second, and let's just see if we can't absorb some of that ink and leave some spots or splotches. This just gives a little bit of some light looks into it, so you can kind of see, I don't know, maybe a little bit hard where some of the ink has come up, so it leaves that lighter splotch. And then our final thing will be our Distress Oxide vintage photo. Now you need to shake that up really, really, really well. You can hear those balls bouncing around. That really helps to get that spray all mixed up. And I have just a little box that I use. I'm just going to lay that down and put a little piece of paper down in there. And that just helps keep it from spattering all over my work surface while I'm spritzing it. You don't need to do a whole lot. Just do a little spritz here and there. That might have been bigger or a finer mist than I wanted, so doing it very gently, I can get some bigger splotches. I'll take that out so you can see it a little bit better, and we'll dry those splotches up. That just gives you a speckled look and just adds once again to your aged look. All right, and if you'd like to dab just a little bit, make sure it's all dried up. And now we've got this really great looking distress look. And we're ready to move on to the stamping. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get our stamping platform. And let me move some of the stuff out of the way. And we're going to go ahead and mount our piece of cardstock to the stamping platform. And start out with trying to figure out where exactly we want to place Willow and the cauldron. I think that's going to be just about the right layout. So I'm going to start with Willow. And this is actually a little darker brown than what my other label was. So this is going to be a little bit different look. That's the cool thing about doing the splatter process, the smooshing process, is that every single time you do it, you're going to get a different look. So we're going to start out with the acorn. And I'm going to go ahead and get Willow set up with the brown ink, the acorn ink. And then I'm just going to make sure that I get a nice, good, sharp image. Now this is the reason I like to use the stamping platform, because this time I'm going to be using a little bit different technique, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off some of the brown, just a little bit here. And then I'm going to take my black, the Nocturne ink. And with the Nocturne, I'm not going to do the whole stamp. I'm just going to catch edges of it. So let's say I do right there, and maybe some across her skirt, maybe a little bit in the middle there. I did get some on my stamping platform, so I'm going to wipe that up real quick. So what I want to do is just have the brown, but then have an overlay of the black, just to kind of give a little bit of interest. I think I may do just maybe a little bit down. You can kind of rub it around a little bit on the surface to get it in the spots you want. I'll do just a little bit so it's not quite so sharp an edge. There we go. So to me that just kind of gives it a little bit of interest because you've got both your browns and your blacks showing up in the stamped image. So we'll take Willow off and grab our cauldron. Place that down there. And we'll end up doing basically the same process with the cauldron. So get that in place. Ink it up in our brown. So I've got brown ink on it. Go back and stamp that. So I've got a brown image, and then I'm going to go back in and add just a little bit of black. And with this, I kind of just like did a quick little dab on top of it. It's very hard to see, but it's not solid necessarily. Let's see what happens when I stamp now. So I just did a quick dab. Okay, so we got a lot of the black, but then you can see some of the brown poking through and peeking out. So we'll take our cauldron off. And now I'm going to use just the acorn for the bubbles. So I'm going to put my bubbles coming up out of the cauldron. And I'm going to do those in the acorn. I won't go back over them with the black. We'll just leave them brown. Again, just make sure I don't have anything that will smear onto the label from my ink. Press that down. And we've got our bubbles there. And then for the final thing, I want to go ahead and put some bats over here on the side. I'll just kind of have them just kind of coming down underneath where I've got the name of the potion. And I'm just going to do the Nocturne, the black, on this particular one. All right, so there we have our stamping. So just play around with that. If you wanted to, you could also, again, you can add more colors. I wanted to just keep with the browns and the blacks to just give it a little bit of interest. So now we can go ahead and remove our label from the stamping platform. Set that aside. And now we will kind of work on distressing the edges a little bit, making it look even more old and worn. So what we'll do, let me put that stamping platform out of the way. So what I'm going to do is I want to actually tear the edges just a little bit. So I'm just going to take it and just kind of make a few little tears. And you probably can't see them very well just yet. But when we start distressing the edges, it should highlight some of our tears. Alright, so you can just see I've just torn those. So now what I want to do is take my scorched timber and my dauber. And with that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around in circles around the edges to give that distressed look. But what I want to do is really try and emphasize my tears. And you can help that along by kind of scraping your fingernail over the tear and then doing your scorched timber over that part that you've kind of peeled back. So go ahead and do another one and peel off some of that paper, just scratching it back just a little bit. So basically what I'm doing is wherever there's a torn edge, I'm just ruffling up the edge of that tear. Just scraping a little bit at the paper. Alright. So now we'll take that and we'll just go in little circles, and again I'm going to try and really emphasize putting ink where those tears are. Okay, so if you can kind of see, I've got those tears, and I've done the scorched timber to hopefully bring those tears out so that they show up pretty good. Alright, so now we are ready to go ahead and do our wax technique to make it waterproof and to kind of give it a really cool look with the wax on the top, on the surface. Okay, before we go ahead and do that wax technique on here, I do want to go ahead and ground Willow and her cauldron. And I'm going to do that just by taking a fine tip black pen and just drawing in just a little bit of ground and some grass sprigs underneath. Maybe do a little bit of grass down here. This just makes it so they don't look like they're floating around. You can scribble just a little bit of texture down there. Draw in some grass sprigs right around the base of her skirt and the cauldron. I don't know if you can see that just kind of gives it just a little bit of reality there. Alright, so now for doing our wax technique, we're going to take a piece of parchment paper, and I did mine kind of long and skinny. You can do it however. Just make sure that it's big enough so that we can actually sandwich the label in between two pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little wax shavings and I'm just going to sprinkle them all across the surface of the card. Now you don't need a whole lot because as it melts it will obviously turn liquid and then you can move it around a little bit. Be very careful because it will get hot. I'm going to break that piece up just a little bit so it's not quite so big. So once you get just a little bit layered down on there, fold your paper over on top of your label, and then we're going to use a heat tool or a hair dryer and just hold that on there until your wax melts and gets liquid enough that you can just kind of scooch it around. So I'll probably speed it up while we're melting the wax, and I'll just kind of show you how to get it to spread around. We just basically want it to be all over the surface. All right, so here we go. Okay, so once you get it all melted down, if you have a few pieces left over, just take a little piece of paper towel and just wipe those off. And just gently wipe across the surface, and this is what this is going to do, is going to take off any excess wax that you don't need, but it's going to leave a very light coating right on top. And it'll even have some on the back, which is fine. That's not going to hurt anything, and that actually will help with the waterproofing. But so now we have got a wax coating. You can kind of see it shining there on the entire surface of our label. So what we're going to do is we're going to set that down and let the wax harden just a little bit, and then we will come back and mount it onto our bottle. Okay, so now our wax has kind of dried up and hardened up a little bit, and it doesn't take but just a few minutes for it to get back to the little more solid state. It doesn't change the color or anything. It just gives you that layer of protection for your bottle. Then all we need to do is glue it onto our bottle. So I'm going to go ahead and take my bottle, and we're just going to glue it down. Now you can do two different things. You can either let some of the torn edges poke up a little bit, or you can go ahead and glue them down. On my first bottle, I went ahead and glued them down, but you can still kind of see them where they are. When you look at it, especially in person, you can see the tears a little bit more. So what I chose to do is go ahead and just use my my precision glue gun. With doing this kind, even though it is a fast dry, you will probably want to go ahead and have some rubber bands out that you can wrap around it until the glue completely dries. So we'll take out 2 or 3 little rubber bands here and have them ready. And then I'm just going to start out by taking my glue and going around all the edges. And then I'm going to go ahead and just put some in the center. Just place it on my bottle. get it where I like it to be. And hold it down for just a minute or two to let it start adhering. Take a rubber band. Oops, got it caught on one of my tears there. Now, I like to have my tears glued down. So what I'm going to do, let me straighten this up just a little bit, is I'm going to go back with my glue and glue my tears down. And you can do however you like it. If you like the look of the tear, I might leave a few of them up. And you can do that as well. And the nice thing about it is if you do get your glue smeared onto your bottle in places you don't want it, you can always scrape it off. Alright, I'll go ahead and put a couple more rubber bands on just to hold it in place for a few minutes. And like I said, it doesn't take a whole long time for this glue because it is a pretty quick drying glue. But before you handle it a whole lot, when you use this type of process, you might let it sit overnight just so that you're sure that you've got a really good solid glued surface. Go ahead and put a little bit of glue under this particular tear. And that's all there is to it. So I'll let this dry just a bit and then I'll take a picture that I will post here at the end of the video. Let's go ahead and zoom out so you can kind of see what our bottle looks like with its label on it. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial today. This is such a fun way to make a potion bottle for Halloween decorations, and you can try using different stamps and different potion names to make a variety of bottles. You can use any color of bottle, any color of ink, any size or shape you choose, and just modify the label to fit the size of the bottle that you have. I hope you give it a try, and then just be sure to check out more tutorials on the design team page at delbellosdesigns.com. Have a great day.